Welcome to Hannity, and tonight, President-elect Donald Trump beats down the abusively biased alt-radical left mainstream media. Now, Trump's senior advisor, Kellyanne Conway, will join us in a few minutes. But first, the president-elect is now fighting back against the press that openly colluded with the Clinton campaign and that tried to undermine his candidacy every single step of the way. Now, earlier today, he met with the New York Times. We'll have more on that in just a second. But first, yesterday at Trump Tower, network executives and anchors from CNN, MSNBC, NBC News, ABC News, CBS News, and Fox News attended a meeting meant to reset relations with the president-elect. Now, Fox News executives were in attendance, but they wouldn't comment since it was an off-the-record briefing. However, according to the New York Post, Donald Trump used the opportunity to call out many members of this dishonest press. Now, Trump reportedly told them all, quote, "We're in a room full of liars, the deceitful, dishonest media who got it all wrong." And Trump even took direct aim at CNN President Jeff Zucker, saying that everyone at the network were liars and that Zucker should be ashamed of himself. Now, the president-elect didn't stop there. He reportedly hit NBC News for their coverage of his campaign, and Trump slammed ABC News' Martha Raddatz, who was at the meeting, for almost crying during election night coverage. You may remember this.
Tim Kaine has a son in the Marine Corps. He's asked by John Dickerson, so if Donald Trump is democratically elected and your son is serving as a Marine, you wouldn't trust his life under that commander-in-chief? And Kaine said, I wouldn't. It's a pretty extraordinary thing to say if you have a son in the Marine Corps and that you don't trust the commander-in-chief. The people in the military defend the Constitution.
Oh, now I'm so sure some in the room had their little feelings hurt. But really, who cares? Didn't they deserve every bit of what Trump said to them? Now, keep in mind, some of these so-called unbiased journalists, they laughed off Donald Trump and said he never stood a chance years before he even decided to run for president. And they each had to eat their words. Watch this.
Donald Trump has been saying that he will run for president as a Republican, which is surprising since I just assumed he was running as a joke.
This man has got some momentum, and we better be ready for the fact that he might be leading the Republican ticket next.
I know you don't believe that, but I want to go on to Matthew Dowd.
Sorry to laugh. Which Republican candidate has the best chance of winning the general election?
Of the declared ones right now, Donald Trump.
Mr. Trump, to answer your call for political honesty, I just want to say you're not going to be president, all right? It's been fun.
President Obama will go down as perhaps the worst president in the history of the United States! Exclamation point at real Donald Trump. At real Donald Trump. At least I will go down as a president.
I think this is going to be really the beginning of the end of Donald Trump.
It is likely to be the beginning of the end of Donald Trump sitting atop the GOP field.
You wrote that this is the beginning of the end for Donald Trump.
There's just no way to win if you over half the population doesn't support you.
Talk about the biggest loser. Isn't that a show on NBC? He could end up being the biggest loser.
There's a possibility, Nancy, that he could win.
No, he's not going to win.
It's impossible.
He's not going to win. He is not going to win. Don't worry about that.
Hillary Clinton only 2 away from 270 electoral votes. Let's say the Clinton campaign is feeling fantastic about Nevada. Let's give her that for a moment. You heard Jeff Zeleny say they're feeling really good about Florida.
This is where we stood coming into the night, 268 to 204, so clearly an advantage for Secretary Clinton.
Donald Trump has won the state of Arkansas. Fox can also project that Donald Trump will win the states of Kansas, North Dakota, South Dakota, Texas, and Wyoming. And we are about to make a major call. Fox News Decision Desk is now projecting that Donald Trump has won the state of North Carolina, projecting that Donald Trump will win the state of Utah.
A victory for Donald Trump in Ohio can be called by the Fox News Decision Desk at this point. Iowa will go to Donald Trump.
Donald Trump has won the state of Wisconsin.
Donald Trump will win the state of Florida. The Fox News Decision Desk has called Pennsylvania for Donald Trump. This means that Donald Trump will be the 45th president of the United States.
Amazing how wrong so many were. Also, earlier today, President-elect Trump, he met with the New York Times. Now, I'm sure they were trying to smooth things over with Mr. Trump. And, of course, after their unrelenting negative coverage of his campaign. Now, Mr. Trump should keep in mind that a few days before this meeting, that paper praised former Obama advisor, now a CNN contributor, Van Jones, as a, quote, star of the 2016 campaign. By the way, the same Van Jones who was a member of the alt-radical left and who viciously attacked Donald Trump on a consistent basis. Here are just some of the things that were said about the president-elect on CNN with Van Jones.
A white lash. This was a white lash against a changing country. It was a white lash against a black president in part. That's the part where the pain comes. And Donald Trump has a responsibility tonight to come out and reassure people that he is going to be the president of all the people who he insulted and offended and brushed aside.
If there's one thing that Donald Trump could do now that might calm some people, we're on track for a tragedy.
No, this is a really sad night. I'm just going to say it. This is a very sad night for the country. You can't polish this turd. He doesn't talk about George Washington. He doesn't talk about Ronald Reagan the way he talks about Putin and Assad. This man has demonstrated an appalling lack of patriotism, and you should be ashamed to sit up here and defend it.
He was describing some Mad Max America. I work in some of the toughest neighborhoods and some of the toughest communities in this country, and I don't know what he's talking about. I've never felt this way in my life. I have read in history, being in moments where there's some big authoritarian movement and some leader that's rising up. And I felt that way tonight.
Now, all of this gets to my larger point tonight. Now, in 2008, if you remember, I said journalism was dead. And this election now shows it was far worse than any of us ever thought. Now, WikiLeaks, they exposed rampant collusion between the media and, of course, Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. We now know that interim DNC chair Donna Brazile from the Clinton campaign gave them multiple debate questions. That's called cheating. CNN was soliciting the DNC for questions that they should ask Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, and Carly Fiorina during their interviews. Reporters asked the Clinton campaign for approval before publishing their stories. So-called journalists allowed the Clinton campaign to edit quotes. Over at CNBC, John Harwood was offering the campaign advice and bragged about going after Trump in a debate that he was moderating. And worst of all, WikiLeaks exposed how dozens of journalists from every major news organization, except the Fox News Channel, were invited to be wined and dined at Clinton campaign chairman John Podesta's house. Donald Trump should keep all of that in mind. The media already had its chance to cover Donald Trump fairly and honestly. They blew it. And in my opinion, it's time to reevaluate the press in this country. And maybe it's time to change the traditional relationship that the press will have with the White House. Now, in this day and age of Twitter and Facebook and Instagram, does Trump really need to be granting access to biased journalists that openly oppose him? Just look at the video the president-elect released yesterday. It was detailing actions that he will take on key issues during his first 100 days in office. Now, Trump can do this and speak directly to you, the American people, without having his words twisted and taken out of context. Why not do that? So until members of the media come clean about colluding with the Clinton campaign and admit that they knowingly broke every ethical standard that they're supposed to stand and uphold, they should not have the privilege. They should not have the responsibility of covering the president on behalf of you, the American people. Here with reaction to all of this is Trump's senior advisor, Kellyanne Conway. Kellyanne, how are you?
Hi, Sean.
You know, I know your name's been mentioned for press secretary, and I know the media got all upset that Donald Trump took his family out to dinner 3 seconds away from Trump Tower one night, and they didn't have the press pool notified. Is it time that maybe we reconsider the conventional way presidents deal with the press in light of all the bias and collusion we've discovered?
Well, apart from the protective press pool question structurally, I think you're going to have a very unconventional presidency in Donald Trump because he's unconventional. He starts out as an outsider, non-politician who's accustomed to building things, fixing things, delivering, producing. He's a guy who produces results, and that's what people want now. I think many in the press, Sean, are still in campaign mode. They're scratching their heads, figuring out how to stop this guy from becoming president or from forming a cabinet in his likeness or from actually doing things, a flurry of activity in the first 100 days, which may in fact undo some of the legacy of their favorite president, President Obama. And they need to get over that. You know, you and I have talked about the snowflakes and the safe spaces on campus, but I think for some in the media, the questions I get, very hostile, the presumptive negativity about him under the guise of fair coverage or balanced coverage is not true.
You know,
they never prepared themselves for this possibility. They never prepared themselves, the viewers or the readers, that this guy could actually win.
I mean, even up until late election night, they were all convinced they knew the outcome, and they were all wrong. I'm a little bit tired, though. I mean, this is outright collusion. Giving questions, seeking questions from the DNC, allowing editing opportunities. Did the New York Times ever allow the Trump campaign to edit a story, look at a story before it was published? Because they've interviewed me a lot over the years. They never gave me that opportunity.
No, the New York Times this year wrote a scathing editorial the day before the first debate out of Hofstra University. So I guess maybe September 25th or so, they wrote an editorial endorsing Hillary Clinton, basically saying why Donald Trump could not, should not, and would not be president. Had a separate article about all the mistruths that he's told, even though Hillary Clinton had been under a cloud of corruption for I don't know how long because of the mistruths she has told. And so we don't expect them to fall in love with him or to fall in line, but they do have a responsibility to get it right. Yeah. And the one thing that happened with Donald Trump, Sean, that's different from what happened with the Bushes or Reagan or other Republican presidents is that in his case, you had journalists going on cable TV, network TV, and in print saying the following: I have to suspend all standards of objective journalism because of this guy. I can't even cover him the way I would cover a regular person because he's not a regular person. I mean, think about that for a moment. So,
journalism is dead, Kellyanne. It doesn't exist, and they shouldn't be given the access.
I sat right next to him at both meetings. The one today at the New York Times, which was on the record, and the one yesterday here in Trump Tower with the network executives and anchors,
I heard that was
which
a classic.
Included 5 people from Fox News.
You did?
And, you know, I do think
I wish I was there.
They're trying... Pardon?
I wish I was there for that beatdown that I heard happen.
Well, a little bit of that, but mostly it was meant to be in the spirit of, okay, let's try to find a little bit of détente here so that we at least get some kind of fair-handed coverage during the transition and, of course, after he's sworn in as president. But Mr. Trump did take the opportunity to tell them essentially that my words now, but he's the one who understood America, attracted America,
100%,
and will now govern America.
Well, they were, look already post-election. They were wrong on Steve Bannon. They were wrong on Jeff Sessions, wrong on Lieutenant General Flynn. I have one question. My email has been blowing up over the speculation that Governor Mitt Romney, who met with Donald Trump, might get the Secretary of State position, and a lot of people are beyond mystified considering all the horrible things and the effort that he helped lead to smear and hurt Donald Trump. And also a lot of people are asking me, what are you going to do? Can you comment on both of those things? Because a lot of people think you deserve a big position, like me.
Well, thank you. That's very kind. I've been offered a big position, but Sean, the fact is that I'm here to support the president-elect and the vice president-elect, both men whom I know and admire greatly, however they need me right now in the transition. I told them as recently as an hour ago, don't worry about me, all that will come together. But in terms of Governor Romney, I think the Secretary of State position is such that, and all the cabinet positions, you have to be qualified and capable, number one. Number two, you have to be loyal to what President-elect Trump has said his vision of the world and his agenda is for those first 100 days.
So if you call him a fraud and a huckster and whatever else, I mean, remember that speech he gave? It was horrible, just awful.
Well, and I just want to say generally, apart from Governor Romney, that there were a lot of never Trumpers who were never Trump up until the last moment. Go read their Twitter feeds. Go pull the tape of what they were saying on TV cameras and in print in different places. They didn't think he would win, and they wanted to pile on. Instead of helping the nominee of their party, they piled on. And in terms of a diverse cabinet, I'm all for diversity, but I think maybe one never Trumper is enough. So let's not get 2, 3, 5 in there. That would be my polite suggestion. But at the same time, I think Donald Trump is somebody who commands loyalty and shows loyalty to those around him, but he's mostly loyal to the American people and the ideas that he ran on.
Well, my
so
email is running
continue to fill that cabinet.
About 100 to 1 against, and people are mad about that he's even considering it, if he really is. I don't know if he really is.
Well, look, that position has not been filled. I want to tell you very frankly, there are a number of candidates in line for that particular position, Secretary of State. And I do hope the job description of Secretary of State is a little bit different from what we've seen from Clinton and Kerry, for example. You don't need to go fly around the world to be an effective Secretary of State. Kissinger and Schultz, they stuck closer to home serving the president. That would be my model.
All right, but I want to know what your position is the next time you're on, because you obviously played a big role for the
You'll be the first to know.
All right, thanks, Kellyanne. Good to see you. Coming up, President-elect Donald Trump lays out his agenda for the first 100 days. We're going to tell you what he's promising you, the American people. We'll get reaction from the RNC's Sean Spicer and Monica Crowley. Also later tonight, Sheriff David Clark, Mercedes Schlapp, they weigh in on Donald Trump's immigration agenda and how some Democrats are already plotting to try and block his plans. That and more straight ahead. And welcome back to Hannity. So President-elect Trump put out a video last night detailing what he's going to do in his first 100 days in office. And here's just a few of the policy plans. Take a look.
On trade, I am going to issue our notification of intent to withdraw from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a potential disaster for our country. I will cancel job-killing restrictions on the production of American energy, including shale energy and clean coal, creating many millions of high-paying jobs. On regulation, I will formulate a rule which says that for every one new regulation, 2 old regulations must be eliminated. On immigration, I will direct the Department of Labor to investigate all abuses of visa programs that undercut the American worker.
Here now with reaction, RNC Chief Strategist and Communications Director Sean Spicer and Fox News contributor Monica Crowley. What I like the most about it is, okay, trade, energy, regulation, national security, immigration, ethics reform, draining the swamp. It was every campaign promise. Following up on a promise to me is really important.
That's right. What I think the president-elect understands is that the first 100 days are crucial. He's got to move with all deliberate speed because he will have a honeymoon period, but it will be relatively short. Maybe shorter than most presidents.
The left is already, they're salivating on attacking him.
But he does have control of the Senate and the House. So in the first 100 days, he's got to do a couple of things that he just laid out, primarily laying out a pro-growth economic agenda that means tax reform and regulatory reform, cutting marginal tax rates, the corporate tax rate, getting that money repatriated back, also regulatory reform, rolling back those executive orders that President Obama put into place, and on the national security side. If he can get those 2 cornerstones in place in the first 100 days, as well as fill the Supreme Court vacancy, rolling back Obamacare, repealing and replacing that, he will be well on his way to getting this economy roaring again. And once he does that, Sean, then he shuts up all of his critics. How long does it take, though? It took Reagan, what, 2.5 years until we really started to see the benefits?
Well, look, I mean, these are executive actions. You haven't seen anything yet. This isn't even the legislative agenda. This is day one executive action.
How long is he going to be signing his name, rescinding all of Obama's bad work?
I think the inaugural parade is going to have to go on without him. But this is real change right away. This isn't waiting for Congress. This is stuff that he can do on all of those fronts right away. But it reminds people, to your point, that what he campaigned on, he's going to deliver on. And I think that's important because he talked about change. And if you didn't hear it out of that, the lobbying ban is huge. It's so forward thinking. It says if you want to serve in a Trump administration, you need to serve this country, not yourself. For 5 years, you can't be a lobbyist. For the rest of your life, you can't serve a foreign government.
Why were some Republicans trying to bring back earmarks last week?
Well, I mean,
what was that?
I just think that the tone is going to change and the actions are going to back it up. We are going to see a government that works for the American people, that's focused on jobs. And finally, to your point, somebody who goes in there and says, I'm going to show you what happens when you do exactly what you say you're going to do. And I think the country's going to reward him for it.
I think that's where Republicans have gone wrong with the American people. In fairness to Republicans, they promised repeal, replace Obamacare, a lot of show votes, but when it came to putting teeth into it, using the power of the purse, their constitutional enumerated power, they didn't use it. or stopping executive amnesty. They ended up funding it.
And this is why Donald Trump is now the president-elect of the United States. He became the Republican nominee for exactly that reason. Because Republicans, independents, disaffected Democrats, they looked at the bipartisan ruling class and said, you are all corrupt. We are sick of all of y'all because you never have delivered on what you have promised us on both sides. And we are now going to try something completely different.
You're filling in for me tomorrow. Thank
Tomorrow
you.
night,
You're
yes.
the best. I know our audience loves you. Sean, good to see you. You deserve a big congratulations. I know how hard you work. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
All right, coming up later tonight, I'll go one-on-one with BuzzFeed reporter Rosie Gray about the alt-left and alt-right that she talks about. But first tonight,
a Trump administration will end this nightmare of violence. We will stop illegal immigration.
President-elect Donald Trump promised voters that he would deport all criminal illegal immigrants, but liberals, they're trying to stand in his way and are now soliciting the help of President Obama. We'll check in with Sheriff David Clark, Mercedes Schlapp, and much more tonight here on Hannity.
A Trump administration will end this nightmare of violence. We will stop illegal immigration, deport all criminal aliens, and dismantle every last criminal gang and cartel threatening our citizens.
That was Donald Trump on the campaign trail promising to deport criminal illegal immigrants as president. Now, according to Bloomberg, in response to Trump's victory, while multiple immigration advocates have been encouraging President Obama to release thousands of foreign Central Americans who have been detained after crossing our border illegally. Now, meanwhile, the Inspector General of the DHS just released a report warning that thousands of green cards have disappeared and that, quote, in the wrong hands, green cards may enable terrorists, criminals, and undocumented aliens to remain in the United States. Here now with us, Milwaukee County Sheriff David Clark, Fox News contributor Mercedes Schlapp. You know, Sheriff, I had on my radio show today 2 parents. Both cases, their kids were killed by illegal criminal aliens, people that were in the justice system that were released back out to the public, including one guy lost his son. He was working overnight at a convenience store, and the guy responsible had kidnapped and raped a woman and still got released and then killed this guy's son. I mean, when are we ever going to learn?
Well, Donald Trump has made it very clear things are going to be different in his administration. He's going to seal the border. And the first place to start in terms of deportation are these criminal aliens. This revolving door has got to stop. The people that you interviewed today, you look at the family of Kate Steinle and others who I have met who have been victimized, American citizens victimized by people who are illegally in the country and then come in and violate our nation's laws. The Department of Homeland Security has handled this very sloppily. You know, they have the casualness of handling these green cards, these documents, like you lose your car keys. Well, they'll turn up somewhere, I guess. This is serious because in the hands of, as you said, document forgers from terrorist organizations, they could cause catastrophic consequences on allowing terrorists into the United States with these forged documents with the help of these green cards. There's been no investigation, no sense of urgency by Jay Johnson or anybody at the Department of Homeland Security, but things are going to be different under President-elect Donald Trump.
Have you, your name's been mentioned a lot, have you been approached for a possible position in the administration?
Sean, I'm not going to go there at this point in time. Look, they're well aware of what they're doing there. Donald Trump will decide in the end who he wants to assist him in making America great again.
I didn't see you on the camera in the lobby of Trump Tower going in and out. Did you sneak in the side door like I did, or what?
Well, look, when the president asks you to serve, you step up and you fulfill that duty. Yeah. I think it would be an honor to serve in the Trump administration. We'll just leave it at that for now.
All right, Mercedes, let me ask you, because this is really important. Politically, you see what I call the alt-radical left. They are going insane. Right. These poor college kids need their professors to give them Play-Doh and hot cocoa and coloring books and aromatherapy and cry rooms. What happens when Donald Trump actually follows up, as we talked about in the last segment, on the agenda, including deporting criminal aliens?
Well, I think that we can all agree that deporting criminal aliens should be a priority for our nation. At the end of the day, these individuals should have never been here in the first place. And guess what? When they try to deport them to their homeland, those countries don't even want them. But the mere fact here is that what we have seen, Sean, is an era of dysfunctional immigration system in America. And that needs to just end. We need to move into the law and order in this country. The problem is that there's this perception in many of these countries in Central America and Mexico that you can simply come into America illegally and stay here. In fact, they're having these cases in which individuals are coming in, they pose with these children that are not even their children, so they bypass the smugglers and are simply coming in because they believe that the Border Patrol agents will be more sympathetic towards them. That has to end.
Do you think this president would be bold enough to actually offer pardons to illegal immigrants? We know the power of the pardon is pretty absolute. You think he could do that for hundreds of thousands or millions of Americans, millions of illegals?
Question. And I think that President Obama, there was mention that the immigration advocates were pushing President Obama to pardon the Dreamers. If he does take that step, I think there will be, I think you will find that Americans will be upset because this is a process that it should not go. Immigration should not be handled through executive orders. This is why we have Congress to act and legislate on these laws. And I think that that's why you have President-elect Trump, who will be working with Congress to push forward an immigration reform that makes sense, where it is about securing the border first and then dealing with the issue of what are you going to do with the illegal immigrants who have been here for an extended period of time.
I think that's always been my idea. I agree as well. Sheriff, last word.
Sean, President Obama, it's my biggest fear, the scorched earth policy. He's like a tenant who's been evicted from a property and he's going to trash the place on the way out the door just out of spite. So nothing would surprise me from Obama in these waning days.
All right, guys, thank you both for being with us. Appreciate it. When we come back, a Hannity shootout. I go one-on-one with BuzzFeed's Rosie Gray. She writes a lot about the alt-right. I'm going to ask her about the alt-left movement. You don't want to miss that. That debate straight ahead and later tonight.
How do you think it was in the Secretary of State, sir? That'll answer for the president-elect.
Rudy Giuliani today, after his meeting with President-elect Donald Trump, the transition team is working hard to fill these key posts. We'll get reaction from Rick Grinnell and Mike Mukasey later tonight here on Hannity. And welcome back to Hannity. So throughout the 2016 election, many in the liberal mainstream media, they've been pushing this new term. I never heard of it before, alt-right, to describe anyone they think is extreme or too conservative. Now, recently I sparked a debate on Twitter with BuzzFeed reporter Rosie Gray. I asked her, quote, Rosie, when will you use the term alt-radical left to describe the Occupy movement, MoveOn.org, and Black Lives Matter, and that group that said, what do we want? Dead cops. When do we want them now? And by the way, why did Obama invite radicals to the White House? Here now to answer that question and contribute and continue the debate is BuzzFeed News reporter Rosie Gray. Now, I got to say this. You're pretty left of center. Fair?
You don't know anything about my politics, John.
All right. You have written a lot about alt-right.
That's right.
Okay. And you asked me, do I deplore racism, anti-Semitism? 1,000%.
I'm glad to hear it.
And so does all conservatives. Why do I believe this is an attempt by the left to alter the lexicon so alt-right will mean conservatives, just like every 4 years conservatives are told they're racist, sexist, homophobic, xenophobic, Islamophobic?
Listen, the alt-right is not some sort of attempt by the so-called liberal media to smear conservatives. I've been very clear in my coverage of the alt-right that they are not actually a conservative group. Part of their political project is to dismantle the conservative movement. So, look, this isn't something that I cooked up. This is a real movement that's happening right now.
Okay, and you got this one guy, Spencer, whoever he is, and apparently there's a picture that looks like he's doing a Nazi salute.
Well, there's a video that shows people at that conference this past weekend giving Nazi salutes.
All right. Do you think any conservative, and Donald Trump was actually asked, or somebody from the New York Times tweeted about the meeting, and he said, Trump on alt-right supporters, it's not a group I want to energize. And if they're energized, I'll find out why. He doesn't want any part of these people.
I think it's great that Donald Trump finally disavowed them. He was slow to do that before when he was asked.
No, he disavowed David Duke numerous times.
he was slow to disavow David Duke. Jake Tapper asked him about it in an interview.
I don't even think he heard him or understood him. I don't even think he. We should have asked him if he knew who even David Duke was. Most people have no idea.
I'm sure Donald Trump probably knows who David Duke is.
But you know what? He doesn't support David Duke. No. There's nothing in his history that shows of racism or anti-Semitism. And if it did, you know what? Conservatives like me wouldn't support somebody like that. You understand that? Mainstream conservatives.
Sure.
All right, here's my question. Would you say, like I have a tape of a group, believe it or not, there's a White Lives Matter group, and they were in Austin, Texas. I want you to watch this tape where they're shouting, F the police, etc., and then they're counting down. What do we want? A dead cop 1. After we have 1, we want 2, and they keep counting and counting more dead cops. Watch this.
FDP! FDP!
All right, I was asking you on Twitter if it was appropriate. That's a White Lives Matter group. I would never want them in a Trump White House, ever. I never even heard of this group, but they showed up in Austin, Texas. Now, I played this many times on my program. Let's go to Black Lives Matter.
Pigs in a blanket, fry like bacon. 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 Pigs in a blanket, fry like bacon.
So if the people in Texas, I'll concede, all right, they're alt-right. Aren't those people that were chanting that alt-left, alt-radical left? And why would you accept that they can go to the Obama White House?
Well, look, I don't think it's those specific people who went to the Obama White House, right? I think you're doing a little bit of a rhetorical trick there where you are extrapolating from...
Wait a minute. If Donald Trump invited a Klan member to the White House, okay, somebody that was part of the group...
So are you comparing Black Lives Matter to the Ku Klux Klan?
I am saying Black Lives Matter that calls for dead cops now is so incendiary and so outrageous that every rational American should be outraged, including you.
Look, I think
why are you not outraged?
I think we can all agree that those statements that are in the videos that we just watched are incendiary. Absolutely.
You don't think you think that's appropriate to invite people from that group to the Obama White House? Really?
You're taking a couple isolated incidents to extrapolate about
Did you hear
how
loud that was? How many people?
I don't think that the leaders who Obama invited to the White House were involved in those specific incidents.
Have those leaders decried? Have they condemned those statements?
I'm not actually sure about that.
Here's my question, though, because I think you're a nice person. Do you think, if you're going to say alt-right, that we can say those groups are alt-left?
I think that you can say whatever it is you want to say. I haven't really heard you take a firm position on the alt-right, though, which is a real movement.
Listen,
do you condemn the actual alt-right?
You asked me the other day on Twitter. I said, I don't even know these people. I've never heard of most of these people. Anybody that puts up a Nazi salute, anybody that's racist, anybody that's anti-Semitic has zero place in the conservative movement. I condemn them. I condemn their views. I condemn everything about them.
Look, I'm glad to hear that, Sean, because you're obviously a very influential person. You have a huge reach. You have this Fox News show. You have a radio show that has millions of listeners.
Yes.
You have a lot of power to determine, who is sort of accepted on the right.
And you are a reporter for BuzzFeed. You have a lot of influence,
I don't have any influence compared to you, Sean. So what I'm saying is, you saying that you condemn the alt-right movement would be a very powerful thing.
I am saying anybody that does a Nazi salute, anybody that believes in those values, anybody that's racist in any way, shape, manner, or form, anti-Semitic in any way, shape, manner, or form, has absolutely no place in the modern conservative movement or being near Donald Trump. So I'll turn it on you. Do you say that anybody that chants pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon, or what do we want, dead cops, they have no business being in the Obama White House? Will you agree with that?
Again, I don't think those specific people were in the Obama White House.
So should members of that group be in the Obama White House?
Look, Sean, I'm not like you. I'm not a pundit. I'm a reporter.
Okay, but you have a lot of influence, and if you're going to press me to give you an answer, I answered honestly. Why won't you say what is so obvious? They have no business, that group, in the Obama White House. None.
Look,
anybody associated with them, no business there.
Look, I still think that you're doing a thing where you're trying to equate Black Lives Matter with the alt-right. I just don't think we're talking about the same thing.
You just heard them chanting they want dead policemen.
The alt-right is a group whose leadership espouses
deal with the dead policeman comments. They're shouting it, and there's large numbers of them.
Look, Sean, we agree that those statements are not acceptable statements to make.
So
we can
then they
agree
should.
on that.
So anybody associated with that group should not be in the White House.
I agree with you that people
All right, I
who
gotta
make
break.
those sorts of statements shouldn't be in the White House. Sure.
All right, was I fair?
You were fair.
All right. Thank you, Rosie.
Thank you, Sean.
Up next, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani. He met today with President-elect Donald Trump, and they spoke about the transition process and some key posts that need to be filled. Coming up next, we'll check in with Rick Grinnell and Mike Lucchese straight ahead.
I'm not going to discuss what I'm interested in or what the president-elect is thinking and mulling over. That's not fair. That's not the right way to do it. And this all has to be done very privately. I don't mean just with regard to me. I mean with regard to everyone else.
How do you think the President Secretary of State, sir?
That'll answer for the president-elect.
All right, that was former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani at Trump Tower earlier today. Now, the former mayor is reportedly being considered for a role in the Trump administration. Here now to talk about it is former spokesman for the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Fox News contributor Rick Grinnell, and former U.S. Attorney General Mike Lucchese. Look, we all know Rudy really well. Mr. Attorney General, I'll ask you, I thought Mitt Romney, who I supported, would have been a great president. I've been very disappointed with him and how he is handled and the comments that he made about Donald Trump. I, for the life of me, cannot understand. You know, here was Rudy out on the campaign trail, out campaigning, you know, on the plane with him all over the country. And apparently he and Romney are being considered. I don't get that.
Me neither. And Romney, remember, is a guy who shriveled under questioning by Candy Crowley. If you can't stand up to Candy Crowley, how are you going to stand up to Vladimir Putin?
No, it's a good point, Rick. The things that he said, huckster, fraud, racist, whatever else he was saying. I mean, I remember that one speech in particular. It was brutal, eviscerating Donald Trump. Why would anybody there think about bringing this guy in? And how would you ever expect him to be loyal in light of how he acted?
Well, look, I think those are good questions. I mean, certainly Mitt Romney is extremely qualified for a lot of different positions. People have talked about him for Veterans Affairs to maybe clean that up. I think
how about
that
the
makes
Treasury
more
Department?
Sense. Or the Treasury Department. Those make more sense. I think Donald Trump has a tough problem on his hands because he's got so many people that are qualified for Secretary of State. And looking at Romney, I think the troublesome kind of way to go down this road for President-elect Trump is to look at policy decisions. I think they disagree on a lot of policy decisions. I think it would be very difficult to try to get Mitt Romney back into the fold of what Trump's worldview is on many of these policies.
Yeah, Rick, I also think somebody's got to ask Mitt Romney, why do you want to work for a guy that you called all these horrible names?
Well, I think the answer to that is that Mitt Romney is a great American and would serve his country. And the reality is Donald Trump has won the presidency. But I think that there are other cabinet posts that would make more sense to utilize his expertise.
Attorney General Lucchese, I think Rudy's the right guy. But
So
does he have any vetting issues, any problems?
He has no vetting issues, no problems.
I'd even think Chuck Schumer would support him.
I would think he would. Rudy has done work overseas for a company that he founded. It's been in business since 2002, never been a breath of scandal about it. And he's done real work. He has never represented a foreign country. He has never lobbied for a foreign country. He has substantial experience in foreign relations, beginning when he was Associate Deputy AG. Negotiated with the Italians to set up a joint task force that resulted in the conviction of numerous Sicilian mafia people, both there and here. Negotiated with Haiti to set up a process for screening refugees so that they didn't have to they could be screened on Coast Guard cutters off Port-au-Prince. Negotiated with Puerto Rico, which is, of course is part of the United States, to screen refugees there so that they didn't come to the mainland United States. He's got substantial
Sean,
experience.
can I add one point?
Yeah, real quick, I got a break.
Heads of state and diplomats around the world all know Rudy Giuliani. They respect him, they know him, and they trust him. He'd be a fantastic pick.
I agree. All right, guys, good to see you. Thank you. When we come back, we need your help. A very important question of the day. Just straight ahead. All right, time for a question of the day. So what do you think of President-elect Trump's plan for his first 100 days? Go to Facebook.com/Sean Hannity, at Sean Hannity on Twitter. Let us know what you think. Before we go, a special happy 13th birthday to Colton Thatcher McFadden. Colton, happy birthday. That's all the time we have left. Thanks for being here. We'll see you back here tomorrow night.